So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another custom scenario, and I don't know who made this one because there are several makers now, and usually when I get sent them I don't actually get given the creator's name, but I'm sure that Master Blaster in particular, who's the one who sent me the replay, will be so kind as to furnish everyone with the identity of who made this, because obviously they do deserve a lot of credit for their work. And this is actually initially it's going to be a more open map. It's not like a traditional scenario, so to speak, where you have sort of very deliberate walls and lines and choke points where the defenders have to dig in. This one has a more open feel to it, sort of more trenches, sort of spike pits, as well as a few little fortifications out here, which I think you can interact with this sort of thing. So you could be able to go into here if you are the defenders, although it doesn't look like they will, considering the close proximity of the 4 attacking armies. It is going to be 3 defending armies against 4 attacking armies. And we'll go through the attackers first of all, because we can go through the defences as we go through the defending armies then, as per usual. This army is going to be played by Peak Keep, who is going to be playing as Isengard, and I'm imagining we're going to see quite a lot of raiders here. We do have several units of these Uruk-hai raiders, obviously the not quite fodder units, they're much, one of the similar units you can look to them as being is like the Angmar Marauders, maybe the heavy goblin infantry, that sort of thing. And they're not going to win any contest for sheer quality, but in the numbers that they are often brought, particularly in scenarios, they can be used to simply overwhelm the enemy. And they're not complete garbage either. They will obviously be very cost effective against a lot of the militia units, which both of the defending armies that are on display today should have some soft and squishy militia units that the Uruk-hai raiders can get their teeth into. But their elites will probably dumpster the raiders. We've also got some half-orc spear guard. Good tool to guard the flanks against cavalry usually for Isengard, but for the most part, as it stands, you would often want to bring the pikemen if you had a choice, simply because they tend to fit into Isengard's more traditional army structures a little bit better than the half-orc spear guard. But in 0.97, when spears are made a little bit more deadly to cavalry, when they become, obviously then they act as basically more mobile versions of pikes, although maybe halberds would be a better choice of words for that. They will be much more deadly to cavalry in 0.97 regardless, and that might make the mobility of the half-orc spear guard more of an appealing option over the pikemen. But here they can still be used as a makeshift pushing unit, which Isengard don't actually have in comparison to the other orc factions. So this is one of the units that you can use for that, and obviously you could throw them away without being too concerned about their safety. More raiders, a lot more raiders, so yeah, this is a very raider heavy army. Another unit of spear guard, however. So bloody hell, this is an awful lot of raiders. We might be into the double digits for raider units in this army. We've also got some Uruk-hai infantry, obviously much better. They are more comparable in quality to stuff like the Guardians of Khan Dûm, although not quite. They definitely need the armour upgrade if they're going to be considered on the same tier as the Guardians of Khan Dûm. It does give you an idea of how good the Uruk-hai infantry can be against most other sort of standard infantry units. If they aren't sort of upgraded in any way, the Uruk-hai raiders should be able to win 1-to-1, which particularly if you're a Kingdom of Men, that is something worth watching out for. I've got some Uruk-hai archers as well. Again, not going to win any contest in terms of sheer quality, but again, arrows down range, particularly when you're on the attack like this, with a numbers advantage, is going to be important just to pour pressure on the defensive lines. And then back here we have the Lurtz hunting pack, which is going to be the general. I think that lad back there is the general. And the Lurtz hunting pack obviously are technically rangers. They have the body piercing, they have 5 damage only, which most rangers have. But they are pretty good at melee as well. They look a little bit like lighter versions of the Naz-Kai. They are by no means as strong as the Naz-Kai in melee, but they're still pretty good, and multiple HP at that. Speaking of, we've got Uruk-hai berserkers here and there. So again, they will be very vulnerable to arrow fire. Very little in terms of their armor values. I think 0 in terms of their armor actually. Little in terms of defensive skill as well, so they are very reliant on their HP to stay alive, and when that runs out they'll fall away pretty quickly. But they are capable of dishing out a lot of damage while they're up, particularly against heavily armoured units, obviously, so that's 2 units of Berserkers. Overall, nothing too standoutish. These 2 Berserkers and the Lurtz hunting pack, really the only thing to write home about in this Isengard army. But again, it's going to be numbers are going to be the attacker's best friend. Second army, we have another Isengard force played by Arcturus, so we'll go through this one a little bit more quickly, because I imagine it's going to be relatively similar, although maybe a little bit stronger, this one, because we've got Uruk-hai infantry at the front, in addition to pikes, which Peak Keep did not have access to. Again, this is going to be potentially very useful, particularly towards the end of the battle, when it's likely to get more in terms of just a pure infantry fight, when most of the ranged firepower has been expended. That's when the pikes can be really useful. More Uruk-hai infantry as well, so yeah, definitely A stronger army this, with pikemen, infantry as far as the eye can see. This may very well actually be the strongest attacking army, if this is anything to go by. We've got some Uruk-hai Berserkers. It is also worth saying that we do have the Nazkai as well, very, very powerful in melee. Very surprised to see them lose the Wardens of the White Tower in the last big siege that we saw though. More Uruk-hai infantry, some Uruk-hai crossbows as well, obviously a very central pillar to what Isengard are all about. Potentially very useful if they can get into the right position to rain death down upon the defensive lines. Some more Uruk-hai archers, and they also have the Guards of Orthanc, which I think actually are the General's bodyguard, indeed they are. Saruman is also here. The Guards of Orthanc, very much a defensive-minded unit, very difficult to get rid of. So we'll see how the defenders deal with that, but the rest is just Uruk-hai infantry. Got some Berserkers and then some more crossbows. Meanwhile, up here, another Isengard army, so it might be all Isengard on the attack, which makes sense considering the defensive armies. Played by Froggy, he's got some Reavers, so he's got some Axemen there for that AP. More Reavers, in fact. And then Raiders, I imagine this is not going to be as strong as Arcturus' army. Some Spear Guard as well, so you have kind of a similar look to this army, although he's got a few more sort of interesting units to look at, like the Pikemen and the Reavers. But the rest is looking like mostly Raiders, some Half-Orc Spear Guard as well, a lot of Half-Orc Spear Guard, and his General, I think? Nope. But this is a unit of Nazkai nonetheless. And then Uruk-hai Reavers, he's got some Berserkers here at the back, and that's pretty much going to be it. He's got some Warg Riders as well though, so he does have a mounted unit which can potentially intercept any defensive cavalry that they may have. Then the final attacking army, we have Starling, who again is going to be playing as Isengard. He's got some Uruk-hai infantry on the front. Infantry, so again a little bit more of a quality focus here, like Arcturus. He's got significantly more infantry rather than Raiders. Uruk-hai Pikemen, he does still have some Raiders of course, but definitely a very infantry focused army this. Just before we move on, Half-Orc Baneguard, which you don't see an awful lot of because there are less of them than the Uruk-hai Reavers, and they tend to be less cost effective overall. Even though they are technically tougher, the increased numbers of the Reavers means you bring the Reavers every time if you have a choice. But they are still shock infantry, so in a scenario situation where you don't really have to worry about picking your army, they can still be quite effective. Then Uruk-hai archers over here, more Baneguard, and then he's got some Nazkai here in the middle along with some more Raiders. 2 units of Nazkai in fact, so that's a big boon there for Starling if he uses them effectively. But now we shall go through the defensive lines, and obviously this fort on the hill, not used, neither is this wooded settlement. We do have the outer settlements over here though. As we get further back, obviously there are sort of some features that you can use to sort of funnel the enemy into you, but it is still going to be quite difficult I think for the defenders to get a good foothold here. But we will start off with Master Blaster, who sent me the replay. He's got some Minas Garithlan swordsmen along with some Greenwatch Garrison footmen in a arrowhead formation over here. In addition to that, he's got some Gwathlo trackers, which are like Ghetto Rangers. They don't have the body piercing, but they can hide, but they do share the same weakness as Rangers, which is their garbage in a skirmish fight. Greenwatch Garrison spearmen, they're not likely to get too much done honestly in this fight. They are primarily a tar pit unit. In melee they are really awful, unless it's against cavalry where they do have a slight bonus. But yeah, I can't imagine them getting too far against the Uruk-hai centric armies. More Minas Garithlan swordsmen, they should do okay against the Raiders though. And then we've also got some spearmen back here who are guarding the rear lines. Some Minas Garithlan archers, which will be good in a skirmish fight. They've got the shield, the armour, more Gwathlo trackers, and some more Minas Garithlan spearmen. And then back here is what is left over from his army, and he's got some Hearthguard of Amon Sul and some Tharbad Warhammers. I think that's 2 units actually of Tharbad Warhammers. That's again another big boon for them. They'll smash their way through the vast majority of the Isengard infantry units that we've seen, and the Hearthguard obviously a very safe place for the general to be. And obviously it's worth saying there is a timer on this battle. So the attackers do have to get a move on, otherwise they will lose just based on the time. Someone did ask for some Rohan action in the last big siege that I showed, and Eclipse 2500 is playing as Rohan, so he's got some red shield of Erkenbrand. Obviously they're tough horse archers with their shield, their armour. They also double as melee cavalry, although that's not going to be too useful against wargs, I wouldn't have thought. And then we also have the 1st Marshal's Bodyguard, which this multiple HP Lancer unit could be really key in disrupting the Isengard advances. Not a huge amount of Rohirrim cavalry, but still enough in this situation, I think, to worry Isengard. They don't have a ton of crossbows or wargs, so if used correctly, this should still be pretty good for Rohan. The vast majority of his army, though, it looks like is going to be made up of the Westmark units, which are slightly better, of course, than the traditional infantry units you'll see as Rohan with their very cavalry-heavy armies. It's good to see Rohan's infantry. Pretty much every time I've seen Rohan in the past 2 patches, really, it's been just a cluster of horse archers and archers, which is just so dull to watch. But we've got some Westmark spearmen over here. Westmark infantry, which again, good infantry units. So I don't think they would beat the Uruk-hai infantry 1-to-1, but they'll certainly beat the Uruk-hai raiders and a lot of the other Isengard infantry units, and there's a lot of these units here. Eastmark spears, which again are just militia spears basically, they won't get too far, but again, every little helps in this situation where the timer is going to be your best friend. A couple of units of Helmingas, and then finally, my personal favourite Rohan unit, to be honest with you, the Westmark Marshals, previously the Marshals of the Red. Really, really good axe units this. Higher tier, not multiple HP, but still very strong. And then finally, as we get back into sort of the better choke points over here, you can see that this is a much more defensive position. The attackers are going to be funneled in through these makeshift fortifications, the encampment over here as well. We have Pasternak, who is playing as the final Cardland army. He's got some Dunedain commanders with the armour upgrade. Again, more lancers, not multiple HP, but if they link up with the Rohan cavalry, could be a real problem for the Isengard forces, as would the presence of the Royal Court House of the Rondel. They are multiple HP, similar in many ways to the first Marshal's bodyguard. And then we have the sort of the strong point of his infantry. He's got some Wardens of Tir and Gorthad, several units of Wardens of Tir and Gorthad, actually 4 units. That's something you wouldn't see outside of Scenario. He's also got a ballista. He's got 3 units of Dunedain, 4 units of Dunedain captains. That's 5 units of Dunedain captains. Jesus. I was wondering that Master Blaster's army did seem a little bit light in terms of quality, particularly seeing as the overwhelming force that was presented before him, but 5 units of Dunedain captains. That's going to be difficult for Isengard to get through, but they do have the missile units, which will help them greatly. Some Dunedain rangers as well. That's 6 units of Dunedain captains. 7 units of Dunedain captains. 8 units of Dunedain captains. Jesus. 8 Dunedain captains. 4 Wardens of Tir and Gorthad. Yeah, okay, so this is definitely where the vast majority of the defensive quality is located. But they are also bottled up, and I imagine there's a rule that they have to kind of stay back here. And again, if the outer defences don't hold up too well to Isengard, then he will have to essentially deal with the vast bulk of 4 armies all at once, so he may very well need all those Dunedain captains. But without further ado, let's begin. So this should certainly be an interesting one. Good to see Rohan again as well. Rohan obviously with the style. I'll be interested to see what Eclipse actually does here. He's got all of his units clustered together very closely, but actually, you know, based on the level of movement so far, I think I will make a little cut while everyone actually no. Rohan are going to move backwards, and based on where his infantry was facing, I assume that the rules allow him to come back to this defensive position over here, or at least send some of his units back. I don't know precisely what Master Blaster is going to do over here. Few little frame rate jitters so far, which is worrying considering I'm not exactly on the highest level of graphics. But yeah, I do worry for this outer defense of Master Blaster. You know, the Gwathlo trackers are not really going to have a fun time against all the Uruk-hai archers. They're really not built for a skirmish fight. And you know, he doesn't really have enough in terms of an infantry presence over here to put up a fight for too long against Arcturus and Peacekeep as they move forward with overwhelming force. As the Rohan army pulls back. He does have these few units over here though, which he can put up a defence over here on these outer barricades. The Tharbad Warhammers of course very strong, as are the Hearthguard. There's a few terrain features on this map which won't get used, actually, like these settlements and villages out here. Still, I would kind of like to see this map introduced as a map that you can have a free-for-all on potentially, because I feel like it would be a really good map for a free-for-all actually, with all of the positions you can take up. Nice open areas, areas with choke points, areas with fortifications that you can take up. Would force you to be a little bit more savvy with your army picks, I feel. Again, I don't feel as though it's worth making a cut as they sort of advance forward, but we will at least go into ×2 speed while this happens. Yeah, this certainly wouldn't be a cavalry only sort of deal, or an infantry only sort of deal, if you had this map was available for free play. We shall see though. 8 units of Dunedain captains. I'll be interested to see how Isengard go about breaking them down. I imagine it will be primarily with the use of their skirmishes, but it will be interesting actually, because they will be very tempted to use up quite a lot of their ammo on this little outer defense of Master Blasters, I think. Which actually wouldn't be the right thing to do. With that in mind, they should just use their infantry to completely overwhelm this defence. Aha! Now we can get into regular speed. And we've got some Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen in Skiltron. You don't see that too often in Reforged. It was almost omnipresent in vanilla, but now we have the Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen going up against the Uruk-hai Infantry. Obviously, there's only going to be one victor in this fight. Uruk-hai Infantry, of course, very mid to high tier infantry units, taking on one of the worst militia spheres in the game for infantry to infantry combat. Still, it will at least slow down the Uruk-hai advance, which is clearly the only thing that Master Blaster's initial army is for. I'm not sure I'd agree with that. Certainly vastly outnumbered, but with the quality you have in that rear defence, you should be fine. 37,000 frames is not a huge amount for a scenario like this either, so things are going to get rolling pretty quickly. But yeah, they are using their skirmishes, trying to go after the Greenwatch Garrison footmen, but the Miniscarithlan swordsmen will absorb some of this fire, and also this is arrow fire they will not be able to use on the significantly stronger defence that is at the rear. Also got those Miniscarithlan swordsmen who are going to be helping out the militia, which should give the Uruk-hai Infantry a little bit more pause. But again, over here we just see another unit of Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen getting attacked by Uruk-hai Infantry, which again is not going to go too well for the Cardland militia. You have these Miniscarithlan archers again. Master Blaster is going to need to use his archers quickly, otherwise his infantry is going to fall apart, and then his archers will simply be caught in melee, so they do need to start using up their ammunition as quickly as possible. Just shooting at anything really would do the trick, because his infantry is going to fall away fairly quickly, you would imagine, and then his archers are just going to be caught in melee and they won't have used up any of their ammo. Getting some kills at the very least would be worthwhile. The Lurtz hunting pack is firing their ammunition, which admittedly will do a lot of damage to the pikes with their body piercing, but even so, that is more arrows they won't be able to use later. The Guatho trackers have also started to open up. Meanwhile, we can see that Starling and Froggy positioning themselves to attack the defensive lines over here. Rohan have already set up shop though, and their Helmingas already in position, shooting down upon Isengard as they advance forward. Going after the pikes as well, good choice. With all of those Wardens of Tir Gorthad, if you take away the Uruk-hai pikes, then Cardland could hold the Isengard infantry up pretty much indefinitely if Isengard don't have sufficient skirmish support. We've got some Uruk-hai raiders coming over here. But it is worth saying that quite a lot of Eclipse's army is made up of spearmen, so they're unlikely to do too well against sustained Uruk-hai infantry pressure. They do have the Westmark infantry, of course. I would be... Again, I'm not sure whether I agree entirely with bottling your own cavalry up like this. I think it's very worth your time trying to skirmish them down immediately, purely because if you leave your cavalry back here and you're already getting assaulted on all sides by infantry, you're not going to be able to use them too effectively. Meanwhile, a ton of arrow fire causing the frames to drop there. But yeah, they're starting to take a pretty decent amount of damage, but also absorbing a lot of arrow fire they will not be able to use later, which I think is the key fact here. Meanwhile, Uruk-hai infantry now being backed up by Froggy's Uruk-hai Reavers, which is only going to hasten the demise of these Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen. And these Miniscarithlan archers that are in close proximity are shooting, but they won't be able to use up even half their ammunition at this rate. This choke point, however, going significantly better. There are Uruk-hai Berserkers over here, and of course Isengard will win eventually. But Cardland have certainly committed enough resources over here to halt Isengard in their tracks. Well, Uruk-hai archers firing at something. Guatho trackers. Miniscarithlan archers trying to pull back. I'm actually surprised Froggy's Warg Riders haven't made an appearance over here just yet. Although I guess there are spearmen back here. They're going to need to be committed to the front line pretty soon. You can see Isengard already spreading out, going throughout the settlements, getting ready to get into positions to shoot right along this formation. Meanwhile, you can actually see that this engagement over here has already started. Uruk-hai infantry, as well as some Uruk-hai raiders being committed forward, and against the Eastmark spearmen, that's going to be an easy win for Isengard. So far it's just been Isengard slowly mulching their way through inferior units to their own. These Helmingas are also taking a ton of ranged fire from the Uruk-hai archers, but again, that is more arrow fire they're not going to be able to use on Pasternak's final defence. Eastmark spearmen getting ready to hold this choke point, but again, it's going to be against Uruk-hai infantry. Unlikely to go too well for them. Well, are they going to send forward some assistance? Half-Orc Baneguard have managed to get in and around. This area over here was not defended. able to go through this area, and this means that, again, I'm not sure whether Eclipse realised that you can go through these areas, but this is not a solid wall, and you only have to look at it to realise it doesn't really make sense for it to be a solid wall. And unfortunately he's going to pay the price for not knowing that, because now his defensive lines are going to get recharged by half-orc Vanguard. Not good for him. And he needs to commit some of his other infantry units at this point, otherwise his whole defensive setup is going to fall apart. He needs to start using his cavalry as well. He needs to start using his cavalry to charge into these units that have overextended themselves a bit from Isengard. This first Marshal's bodyguard could recharge the rear charge from Isengard, and then start to really rout off this Vanguard, but he seems again reluctant to use his cavalry, which is a real shame. Uruk-hai Raiders, victory is a distinct possibility. They're only going up against Eastmark Spearmen, so that makes a good deal of sense. What's going on over here? So now at this point, Cardland have actually broken off some of their resources and are rapidly retreating. So again, at this point, these units back here have just been left behind, and they will be, of course, mulched by the oncoming Isengard advance. So far, Isengard have had a pretty good game. They've advanced in exactly the sort of fashion they needed to. I'm actually surprised Cardland are not shaken up by this. Their morale is notoriously not great, and they don't have any buffing units over here either. Well, over here they're wavering in the face of the half-orcs, but pretty soon this will free up all of Arcturus's and Peak's armies to advance forward and start to go into the trenches over here and try to overwhelm the defence. We'll see how Rohan are getting on, because they've had a pretty disastrous start with their organisation problems. Eastmark Spearmen are actually going to win against this Uruk-hai infantry. Now, Uruk-hai infantry has stabilised. I think they were taking arrow fire in the back. I can't imagine any other reason why they would be losing that. This Uruk-hai infantry and Uruk-hai pikemen position is not exactly in the best formation, but they should start to turn this fight around against the Westmark Spearmen. Helmingast going to be able to get a volley off, I would imagine. Getting their fire arrows in. Again, this is a little bit chaotic. Finally, we can see that the cavalry is now moving. Those wargs are in close proximity, however. Again, I'm not really sure I agree with the fact that he's going over here. If he charges into the wargs, 2 units of warg riders are over there. If he does charge into the wargs, then he deserves the punishment he will receive. Fortunately, however, the Westmark Marshals, proving to be a good unit here, in tandem with the Westmark infantry, are going to be able to deal with half-orc Vanguard. Although it looks as though he's trying to pull this Westmark infantry out, which again I really don't agree with. I feel like I've been highly critical of Eclipse 2500 in the past couple of battles, but he's made it really difficult for me to be complimentary. Nazkai moving forward, the Uruk-hai archers still shooting into this position, and doubtless, I think, yeah, it is Starling, doubtless he will be targeting the Westmark Marshals. They're definitely the most dangerous of all of the Rohan units that are on display. They'll be able to do a lot of damage to most of the Isengard infantry units, all of the Isengard infantry units to be honest. Even the Nazkai, if the Westmark Marshals got a charge off on them, would not appreciate it. These Uruk-hai infantry, however, are not in the best of positions at this point. Overwhelmed, not exactly in the best formation. Slowly but surely being cut down. What's going on here? Pasternak's cavalry is out here, which is good to see actually. Good to see this Cardland cavalry being used aggressively, because this is a lot of raiders. And the raiders will be pretty much defenceless to good charges.
We've lost half of our men.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me that Master Blaster's army is already looking a little bit haggard. But still, he slowed down the advance long enough. Now you can see the Dunedain being targeted by the arrow fire. Will Pasternak be bold and continue to charge into these raiders? Because they need to thin out the enemy ranks somehow. They can't place all their eggs into the basket of those Dunedain captains being able to do all the heavy lifting at the end. They need to get kills now. As we see, those Dunedain are going to fall back for the time being. They do need to stay in the more open part of the battle, in my opinion, though. Meanwhile, over here you can see the Hearthguard of Amon Sul blocking the way. And they're going to be fighting off against the Uruk-hai Raiders. Going to need some support, actually. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are not particularly numerous. And they are going to get some support from the Minisker Rithlin Spearmen, and this should be enough to send Uruk-hai Raiders packing, at the very least. Meanwhile, Tharbad Warhammer's defeat is a distinct possibility over here, and that is unfortunately because they have charged into pikes, and the pikes have been able to get into formation. And that means they are going to be able to keep these Tharbad Warhammers at bay. At the very least, the Tharbad Warhammers will take a long time to get through these Uruk-hai pikemen. So it's not really the ideal engagement for them. They really wanted to go after raiders and infantry so they could get a lot of kills quickly. Instead, they're sort of entrapped in these pikes. Meanwhile, more of the Rohirrim units, the Westmark spears. A lot of these initial companies of Uruk-hai not having the best of times. Master Blaster's other unit of Tharbad Warhammer's also over here. Over here, you can see that the Nazkai are coming in, finding the gaps, and obviously Starling has been playing the game for a long time at this point. He's going to be able to find gaps like this. And he's taken full advantage, really, of the confusion. Meanwhile, these Red Shields have rear-charged this section, along with the 1st Marshal's bodyguard. What happened to the Wargs? Wargs? They can't all be dead, surely. I'm confused. Something that I missed. Unless the Wargs have gone to a different part of the battlefield. We shall see, I suppose. But over here, Rohan have managed to turn this around, despite an initial worries. In the end, the overextension from a few of the Uruk-hai units was punished by Rohan, but they have also paid the price themselves. A lot of Rohan's manpower had to be expended in doing this. And you'd have to imagine eventually, once another wave of attack comes in, Rohan's defence will probably fall down. You can see, as far as the eye can see, indeed, there are the Wargs in the distance. You can see that the Isengard armies are converging on this position. The Westmark infantry, however, fighting hard and doing very well. It does go to show, especially in the next patch, Rohan's infantry will be made better. But even now, Rohan's infantry is not useless like most people think. I think it's because most people only ever see Rohan do that very heavy cavalry and skirmisher build, which means you don't get to see an awful lot of the Rohan infantry, which I think is a real shame. Rohan definitely one of the better looking factions to my mind. Meanwhile, Dunedain commanders, actually the Wargs going after the Dunedain. They're going into the Tharbad Warhammers here, the Wargs, and they will do a decent amount of damage off the charge, but they really don't want to stay too long in melee with the Tharbad Warhammers, because they will start to take some real punishment. They might not be armour focused per se, but the Tharbad Warhammer's extreme attack values are going to really do damage to the Wargs. And now we also have spearmen on hand. As this long line continues to hold, over here there have been less gaps for Isengard to take advantage of, but also there are less defenders over here, because this is what's left of Master Blaster's army, which primarily consisted of spearmen and a few archers. So you'd imagine eventually Isengard should have some joy over here, but these Miniscarithan archers shooting point blank into this big blob of Isengard forces. And over here you can see, yeah, I think this is probably where this line is going to fall apart first, unless he continues to receive support from Pasternak's cavalry. Again, that wasn't really the best of charges, but it is still doing some morale damage to Isengard. And with only these basic units, they will take some time to cut their way through the Miniscarithan spearmen. So Cardin's defence is actually holding up relatively well so far, and they are also baiting Isengard into using more of their ranged power, although at this point there is a gap over here, and Isengard are going to be able to pour through, get a nice rear attack here. It may only be with half-orc spear guard, but now that they're attacked in the rear, this Cardin line will probably start to fall away fairly quickly. And still there are a lot of Isengard reserves marching across the field, as you can see. How are Rohan getting on? Rohan is still fighting well. The Westmark infantry doing well for themselves. There's fire arrows coming in now, though, trying to deal with the Helmingas. Uruk-hai infantry over here going to get into the Helmingas as well, so you would imagine at this point it's going to be the end of Rohan's skirmishers, although I think over here we do indeed see the Rohirrim cavalry, although the Wargs are in hot pursuit of the Red Shields. The Red Shields are horse archers, but they've probably used their ammunition at this point, which is a shame, because that would be ideal for killing off the Wargs. You can see the 1st Marshal's bodyguard still over here, and actually killing off a general. Killing off, is that Starling's general? Could very well be. And this, I think, is the problem. I think the Wargs would have been much better served trying to guard their backlines from these lancers, because so far the defensive lancers, while they haven't been huge in number, the 3 units have done a lot of good work. But you can also see that Isengard are pushing Rohan back. The defensive line, which was initially here, has been pushed all the way back to here, and also Rohan's numbers are starting to flag a little bit. The Westmark infantry starting to feel the strain of continued battle. The Westmark marshals are still alive, and their AP will certainly be welcome. But more and more infantry is pouring forward. Meanwhile, over here, on this archery range, the Tharbad Warhammer's trying to hold back all of these half-orcs. And they will do so for a time, but eventually you would imagine they're probably going to get attacked in the rear at some point. Like has happened over here, you can see that very quickly, as Isengard were able to attack into the rear over here, they were able to overwhelm this front line. However, Pasternak's cavalry is still online, and they are still able to get being able to get some nice charges off, although they are spears they are charging into, so they want to be careful. They definitely want to go after softer targets than that. There's a unit of Miniscarithlan spearmen guarding this choke point over here, but they will need to engage somewhere else in a moment, as Isengard have been able to overwhelm this defensive position over here. A few routing units though. This defensive line over here, the Gwathlo trackers have been firing for an indeterminate amount of time. But now I think that, yeah, the numbers of the raiders, the spear malice from the Miniscarithlan spearmen not helping matters. They're still holding the line, but not for too much longer, you would imagine. See over here the red shields continuing to run. Honestly, the fact they're sort of drawing off the wargs, allowing the lancers to do their work near the main event, is probably worth it overall, seeing as they've certainly used their ammo at this point, so they will have got some kills. Tharbad Warhammers. Ooh, those Dunedain commanders are starting to feel the strain of this. I mean, they're charging into spears, which, again, is not really the prime target you want to be going after with your cavalry. I mean, this is a lot of half-orc spear guard. If you can help it, you really want to be going after stuff like the Uruk-hai Raiders, because you've got a good chance of breaking them off the charge, and they won't be able to do too much damage in melee. Meanwhile, Rohan are still fighting on. The Westmark units really proving their mettle against, you know, a lot of Uruk-hai infantry and pikes were over here, and they've done really very well for themselves. Meanwhile, these Westmark marshals going up against another unit of Uruk-hai infantry, but at this point, numbers are going to be their worst enemy. There's still these lancers which could provide some support, but ultimately there, you know, only 23 of them left against a very healthy looking unit of Uruk-hai infantry, and that's going to be them breaking. Yeah, Rohan's line at this point in real trouble. Royal Court of House Thorondor able to get a charge into the Naz-Kai, and that was a good charge as well, several of them falling. Doing damage to those elites is going to be important when it comes to that final stand. If those Dunedain captains do not have an equal, it could get pretty messy for Isengard. These Westmark marshals over here still fighting hard, killing off as many Uruk-hai as they can. I haven't seen the crossbows get used yet though. And again, saving the crossbows for the late game certainly would be just the right thing to do for Isengard in this situation, I think. Those wardens... Oh, that was not a good move there from Eclipse. He did not charge into the Uruk-hai infantry, essentially rolled up next to them and then stopped. Oh, it's Uruk-hai crossbows, this is. It's even worse then, they should have got a charge off on them. That could have been really decisive into the late game. What's going on over here? Westmark infantry now, despite fighting really hard and really well, for the vast majority of this fight so far, numbers now coming into play. Royal Court House Thorondor still doing okay for themselves. They are charging into units which do not have an anti-cavalry bonus, and they are doing significantly better for themselves, although that is also Pasternak's general, so he does need to be careful. Cardland can scarcely afford morale penalties. Still a few units over here, still a few Tharbad Warhammers from Master Blaster, but very little else. I think he managed to save a single unit of Spearman back to the final stand. Indeed he did. But again, it's a very bottled up position that the defenders have, so if the attackers have got the right tools for the job, if they haven't expended too many of their resources, in particular stuff like their crossbows. There's also that ballista though. Ballista could be important. I'm really impressed with the Rohan infantry, honestly. They've done really well in this situation. Isengard's infantry, well, the Uruk-hai infantry certainly, is stronger than the Westmark infantry. And they also have pikes as well, which Rohan traditionally struggle to deal with. But I feel as though the Rohan infantry has really done as good a job as they were able to over here. Despite the initial difficulties with getting surrounded, they quickly corrected that with their cavalry and their axemen, and caused Isengard quite a lot of problems. But, having said that, The initial defensive lines still have not yielded a lead. In fact, we are in a situation where the defenders are 30% behind the attackers heading into this. But, like I said, 8 units of Dunedain captains is tough to deal with in melee. 8 units of multiple HP Swordmaster units. Again, they are not too far behind the Haven Guard in terms of strength, so it gives you an idea of what Isengard are actually going up against here. Especially seeing as they do have pike support from the Wardens, so it's not as if Isengard can rely on whatever pikemen they have left to simply keep the Dunedain captains at bay. And they've also got rangers as well as a ballista. The ballista is now firing as well. Routing could be a problem for Isengard here. Rohan still have the First Marshal's bodyguard as well, which could come into play. Royal Court of House Rondor. Cardland at this point would probably be best off preserving the life of their general. Well, there's a lot of battle sound effects, but I think it's primarily just from units that are already retreating. Isengard celebrating their destruction of the Rohan front line. So, how do Isengard go about this? Well, to be honest with you, the only thing they can do is just to sort of charge forward, try and overwhelm with sheer numbers. There's actually 2 ballista here, which I can't believe I missed. This one's not really in the best of positions, though. We'll see what Pasternak can do. I mean, he's certainly got the tools to throw off Isengard for a long time. I mean, we've also got some Tharbad Warhammers that Master Blaster was able to save, so that's some AP as well. Miniscarithlan Spearmen backing up the Wardens of Tir and Gorthard. I mean, I'm not really sure what Pasternak's doing here. You need to defend these lines. If they break through any one of these choke points, it's all over. Doesn't matter how strong the Dunedain captains are, they'll be overwhelmed and caught out of position. So you need to commit resources to the front lines. I really don't want this to turn into another rout about how people try to sort of save their power and try to layer their defence. I would really rather this doesn't turn into that again. But it might. These Wardens of Tir and Gorthard need backup, because otherwise the pike formation will buckle. They need help from one of these units of Dunedain captains at the very least. The Dunedain captains will also make really quick work of the Uruk-hai Reavers. You can tell that they're trying to sort of push their way around these choke point defences. Just a quick look over here. The First Marshal's bodyguard charging into this Uruk-hai infantry, and they're going to be destroyed for it. Surprised they didn't send a unit of Half-Orc Spear Guard to do that, to be honest with you. But we are now essentially into the final phase of this fight. It's a nice sunset. Please, Pasternak. Please commit forward more than this. I think honestly though, the fact that the attackers still have ranged capabilities at this point in battle is probably not good, and Pasternak's indecision here is probably going to be the final nail in the coffin. He's now committing forward some resources at least, but you can see that these ballista, they haven't really chosen a target. They keep flitting backwards and forwards between various different ones, and this means they're going to die before they get anything done, really. The Dunedain Rangers have now opened fire. I mean, Isengard, they've still got berserkers and such. There's a lot of routing. I mean, again, the Dunedain captains are going to be tough to break down in pure melee, but it's this which I'm really worried about. You know, there seems to be a real reluctance to, like, this is not good. If Isengard push in here, it's game over. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of urgency to reinforce this line. Another unit of pikes, sure, but like, I mean, finally now they're moving in. I can understand why you'd be reluctant to while you're taking arrow fire, but you don't have a choice in this situation. There's a huge amount of body piercing going on there from the Dunedain Rangers, also doing a lot of damage. And that has saved the day somewhat, because Isengard were on the cusp of breaking in, and then they would have just flooded into this section. So fortunate there. The Cardland were able to bring that down again. I can't get close to blobs when the Rangers are firing into them, because the frame rate just dies immediately. The Dunedain Rangers also very unsurprisingly going to be the full focus of the Isengard skirmishes. Uruk-hai archers still with plenty of ammunition left. All these Wardens of Tir Gorthad closing in on this position over here. Again, Uruk-hai archers and raiders not going to be too much of a problem for Tharbad Warhammers, Dunedain captains, and the Wardens. Let's not forget the Rohirrim are still going to be a factor in this battle as well with these First Marshal's bodyguard. If they pick their charges right, they could yet prove to be pretty decisive with the amount of infantry they can kill. Uruk-hai infantry over here. The Uruk-hai crossbows are getting up on the hill, however. That would probably be a good target for the First Marshal's bodyguard to sacrifice themselves to go after, to be honest with you. We now have a double-layered pike line. The Nazkai and the Uruk-hai Berserkers have managed to push their way through, but I don't think they'll actually accomplish all that much, to be honest with you. There are Dunedain captains and Wardens of Tir Gorthad over here. The Dunedain Rangers also going to push in and add their expertise to the melee fight. Meanwhile, Dunedain Rangers firing at something. Can they even go round here? I'm not sure they can. I think this is impassable terrain. If it's not, then yeah, they can't go up here. It was a nice try from Starling, but unfortunately not able to take advantage of map errors there. Because if he could get up there, it certainly wouldn't have been intentional. Well, Isengard really struggling on this side because they haven't committed as many men to this front. This ballista is still not firing though, which I'm really surprised about. It should just be firing at anything at this point. Hearthguard of Amon Sul from Master Blaster is still alive, amazingly. That's going to be another important unit actually. Multiple HP spears. Could prove to be really effective. Meanwhile, the First Marshal's bodyguard getting a nice charge off there on the Nazkai. Killing off elite units like that. Very worthwhile. Give the Dunedain captains impunity in melee. Meanwhile, as we see this melee fight continue, the Wardens of Tir Gorthad holding the front line. Now with the support of the Dunedain captains, Isengard are going to start to struggle. And this is obviously where the vast majority... Oof. That ballista getting some nice hits there. Trying to go right along the Isengard line. A lot of potential there. Dunedain Rangers still firing. Both units of Dunedain Rangers. Hearthguard of Amon Sul also getting into a decent position to shoot into this blob over here, which is now starting to include Uruk-hai infantry. Are there Berserkers over here as well? Not just yet. I don't think. It's hard to tell in this blob of Uruk-hai, but the Uruk-hai infantry will put up more of a fight, but even so, over here is where Cardland are at their strongest at the moment. It doesn't really surprise me that the attackers are going to try and go over here, because it is a bigger choke point to try and push your way through. Dunedain captains still in reserve. Still plenty more Uruk-hai to cut their way through, however. You can see in the background there the First Marshal's bodyguard. Actually, those are wargs. And the First Marshal's bodyguard taking a couple more losses. They really want to stay clear of the wargs. If they can get a few more charges on, particularly into the rear of this blob over here, which could cause a mass rout, then their job will have been done. But eventually the wargs are probably going to get hit by a stray arrow, the Cardland general. But in this final stand situation, I don't think it will have too much of an effect. Both the Wardens and the Dunedain captains inspire units around them. And the Dunedain captains, at the very least, I would imagine, are probably unbreakable. Defeat seems certain for the Uruk-hai on the front line still, however. The question really is if Cardland have enough numbers to see this through. Still more arrow fire. Uruk-hai crossbows getting some good hits now. And that could be a real problem. Now we can see another wave of infantry comes forward. Half-orc spear guard this time. Not going to be too much of a problem in melee, but again, it's just more men that they have to try and deal with. Over here, meanwhile, Cardland having a much better time. Although now Uruk-hai Berserkers are on the front line, you can tell they're trying to get in and amongst the Cardland formation, trying to disrupt the pikes and the spears. But they will pay a price for that as well. As soon as their hit points are gone, the Uruk-hai Berserkers will fall away very, very quickly. You can tell Isengard are trying to just shove their way through.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
But Master Blaster is going to be committing his half-guard of Amon Sul over here to shore up the defence. Adding some spears there. It's not really over on this bit they need to commit though, they need to go over here, because this is where Isengard is starting to really make a really good fist of it. The Wargs are coming forward. I can't help but notice the blue star on the radar that denoted the First Marshal's bodyguard is gone now. You can tell that Isengard really want to try and push their way through here because the Wargs are also going to try and get in there. But the Hearthguard are now in the right position to hold the line, so Cardland should survive on this front for a little bit longer. Meanwhile over here, Isengard's starting to push. Do Cardland have any reserves that they need to get in here quickly? When you see this happening, you need to have reserves that you can commit immediately, otherwise Isengard are going to try and... I mean, again, you can see Froggy has shifted over his Wargs. He wants to get his Wargs through a gap that appears. And you can see now that Arctura is sending up more and more Uruk-hai. Ones of Tir Gorthad are being committed, but I mean, at this point, it's getting close to the point where Cardland need to just commit everything, because Isengard are starting to run out of units that can do that. And the Half-Orc Spearguard did pay a grievous price for doing so, and they didn't actually get all the way through. So again, Pasternak's army holding on by the skin of its teeth, because again, if a gap forms, I think that's it, that's game over. The First Marshal's bodyguard actually is still alive, although there are only 4 of them, so I imagine either the crossbows, pikes or wargs got a hold of them. The wargs are trying to push their way through, although they are trying to push their way through pikes and various types of spearmen, and there are also Dunedain captains on the other side, so I don't think the wargs are going to get too far, to be honest with you. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul will stand strong. And yeah, the wargs not having the best time of it. What have we got in the background over there? More raiders. Uruk-hai archers. What is the percentages looking like now? Significantly closer, but still over 10%. Uruk-hai berserkers have also taken some damage. But at this point you can see that Cardland are starting to run low on resources. And there are still Uruk-hai marching forward, a lot of pikes. This line again was stabilised. Uruk-hai raiders on the front line, Uruk-hai infantry, Uruk-hai pikemen. But the Dunedain captains at this point are a real problem for Isengard, because they can't really afford to fight them in a sustained melee in a line fight like this. The Wardens of Tir Gorthad are still here as well, so the Uruk-hai pikemen won't give them the edge they need. Pasternak is never going to retreat these guys, is he? He's not going to allow Isengard to come in. I refuse to believe someone would do that. Dunedain captains. There's still a few rangers firing. There's still a little bit in terms of reserves as well. These Dunedain rangers firing off into, unfortunately, a unit of Half-Orc Spearguard that's routing, so that's a real waste. The ballista getting into position. The Dunedain rangers using their armor-piercing missiles to help shore up this line. The wargs were not able to push their way through. This ballista is not getting the best of hits, but it is still going to cause morale damage to Isengard. There goes Froggy's general, certainly. He was in a unit of wargs. He pushed his way through, but was then simply cut down by the rangers. That's not good for the attackers either. That's going to cause some morale problems. It's a unit of Uruk-hai infantry. More raiders. Those wargs are routing off as well. The ballista might be out of ammunition at this point. They may very well just be committed to melee. More bodies for the front line, which is really what they need at this point. At this point, this Isengard assault is not looking too healthy, and the First Marshal's bodyguard is still alive as well, just getting some nice rear charges, doing what damage they can. That's enough to rout that unit of Uruk-hai archers. Really backs to the walls here for the defenders. A battle of 2 choke points here. Uruk-hai infantry just, again, this ranger fire right along the Isengard line is really proving to be a problem. There goes another Isengard general. At the hands of the Dunedain captains. More infantry marching forward. There's still a line of infantry there. Guards of Orthanc, berserkers, but they are also being targeted by the ballista. And some archers by the looks of things, although no, the crossbows are actually being targeted by the archers.
It's time to press the attack.
That's one of the Isengard armies dealt with. Someone admitted defeat. Not Arcturus. Not Starling. And not Peak, so it must have been Froggy. After the loss of his general, his army lost the will to fight. More Dunedain captains being committed over here, because this is a section of line which is starting to look a little bit unhealthy. But another unit of Dunedain captains will patch that right up. Isengard could still push. I mean, the Guards of Orthanc, they aren't the biggest unit, but they are still spears, and they could still be used to try and push through this Cardland line. And again, the line here for Cardland is everything. They need to maintain it, because if they don't, Isengard is still just going to be able to surround and finish off, although there's still another unit of captains in reserve. More routing, and over here, Isengard's assault is in danger of falling apart, which will free up some resources for Cardland. Yeah, Master Blaster's army is still just about standing. I don't know if Rohan are. We haven't had the ping that says they're running for their lives yet. So I guess they are still alive, if only just. That ballista doing some nice damage there. Just picking away at the reinforcements that the Uruk-hai are going to be relying on here. These Dunedain captains. 8 units of Dunedain captains. That's certainly something new. But considering the scenario's structure, I think it does make a good deal of sense, because that initial engagement, I mean, the attackers went 30% ahead. It was always going to be difficult for Master Blaster and Eclipse to try and trade evenly with those Isengard armies out on the front. But they did manage to, again, those First Marshal's bodyguard, the individual units Master Blaster managed to save, they've shored up the line enough to help Pasternak here. And it could very well be enough to turn this battle around into the favour of the Kingdoms of Men. More Uruk-hai infantry coming forward, another unit of 172 the defenders are going to have to try and throw off. More men marching forward, more pikes as well. Berserkers. The Uruk-hai once again trying to push their way through the lines. The Rangers are sort of positioning themselves. They do still have ammunition, but they're positioning themselves so that if the Uruk-hai do push their way through, they will have some resistance that they have to fight.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
In fact, they are going to be committed to the front line to stop this Uruk-hai push. It's a very thin defensive line at this point, and the Dunedain captains starting to feel the strain, but there goes a big rout. That's going to be Isengard's worst enemy at this point. Traditionally, Cardland, pretty rubbish morale. But in this situation, with all of these units, the inspiration units, Cardland are going to hold their ground, even without their general. There's still reinforcements over here. Again, this unit of Uruk-hai infantry is essentially just going to have to be committed over here just to keep these units occupied, while Isengard try and bash their way through. This section over here, you can see once again the Uruk-hai trying to force their way through. Another unit of pikes being committed forward, but Isengard are running out of resources here. Cardland only really have to hold on for a little while longer. And as soon as that is true, as soon as they've held on for long enough, even if Isengard were to push their way through, then the quality of the Dunedain captains would be able to see them through. Not quite yet, though, I don't think. Isengard do still have a worrying amount of infantry just out there. But again, only 5% now, the difference. So the defender's probably feeling pretty good about the situation now. Also, you have to remember the time limit, which is also working in favour of the defenders here. The Uruk-hai can't afford to pull back and try and bait the defenders out of their defensive position. Not that they would, I'm sure. The final unit of Dunedain captains that was in reserve has been committed forward, stopping the Uruk-hai advance once again. And with longsword in hand, Dunedain should be victorious here. Still a few more units over here from Arcturus, but Uruk-hai infantry and Uruk-hai archers are not going to be sufficient to beat Dunedain captains. There's also still a few Hearthguard of Amon Sul. Still a few Tharbad Warhammers as well, which goes to show how strong they are in this situation. That AP certainly will have helped. Hello. Isengard doing their best to force their way through here, but again, it's a sign of desperation when you're using pikes to mass push. Because they can take a huge amount of damage when they're when they don't have their pikes down, and when they're marching forward, obviously their pikes are up. Particularly against units like Dunedain Captains. Another unit of Uruk-hai infantry moving forward. The guards of Orthanc are also on the front line, but they took a strafing shot there from the ballista. Well, you know, victory seems certain for the Dunedain Captains. One last push from the Uruk-hai, but I think Cardland are going to have the strength to deal with this one as well. There's another unit of Dunedain Captains heading over as we speak. More units being committed forward, but I think this is going to be just about the end, although there's still a long way to go in this fight. We're not even into the final 10,000 frames yet, and already you get the sense that this battle is going to be wrapping up. Unless there's a unit in the corner of the map which no one moves. The guards of Orthanc do actually force their way through the lines, but they're just going to be met with another unit of Dunedain Captains. All those Dunedain Captains had the armour upgrade as well, making them that much tougher. Got more in common, I suppose, with the Temple Inquisitors in that respect, in the sense they can upgrade their armour. There's the First Marshal's Bodyguard. That's the Rohirrim General, I'm pretty sure. Running around, killing off the final crossbowman. These pikes have managed to get into formation, to be fair to them.
Something changes in the course of battle, and defeat seems almost certain.
And they do still have a decent amount of this Uruk-hai infantry, you know. But that is that's no good. That's another rout as the ballista sort of scythes its way. Still a few Uruk-hai berserkers left, but I don't know. There's still a few Uruk-hai infantry fighting these rangers. I mean, the guards of Orthanc are strong, tough to kill, but you would imagine the spear malice is probably going to hit them against something like the Dunedain Captains. You would think. Only a 3% differential now. This is really, really close. Uruk-hai infantry, the Uruk-hai pikes. Will these Dunedain Captains pull through? Because this is a lot of Uruk-hai infantry, and at this point the Wardens of Tir Gorthad simply don't have the numbers to hold back this Uruk-hai. It could be with the final push that Isengard finally managed to bust through this Cardland defence. That was the sound of body-piercing projectiles, and the Dunedain Rangers shooting into the flank of these Uruk-hai. Those Uruk-hai berserkers moving over here with the Uruk-hai infantry, so definitely the attackers at this point focusing all their resources over here. Some more Uruk-hai infantry. Unit of 13 Dunedain Captains, which need to get a shift on, to be honest with you. They can't afford to walk in this situation, because the guards of Orthanc are proving to be real troublesome. Then again, they were fresh when they came in here, unlike the Dunedain Captains who have been fighting for some time. And the addition of something like the Uruk-hai berserkers, and at this point the Uruk-hai are flooding forward, the Dunedain Captains not able to get there in time. Wardens of Tir Gorthad heading over 18. The ballista now turning around. Suddenly things are looking a little bit sketchy. Tharbad Warhammers and Hearthguard of Amon Sul. With the final push, Isengard may have given themselves the W here, because they've got another unit of Uruk-hai infantry coming in, a unit of 60 Uruk-hai berserkers, which are the sort of thing which at this point could be a match winner. And there goes another Isengard general. That's probably not the best news. Another player admits defeat. Tharbad Warhammers coming in over here, presumably to try and kill off what's left of the guards of Orthanc. But now you can see the Uruk-hai are flooding in. And this is exactly what Cardland wanted to avoid for the longest time. To be fair, it's happening at the end when they still might be able to pull it out. If this happened earlier in the fight, it would have been disastrous. But at this point, you can see this is exactly what Isengard have been wanting to do all this time. The Uruk-hai berserkers able to wrap up the line with the support of the Uruk-hai infantry and the guards of Orthanc. And the attackers have actually pulled out a bit more of a lead once again. There's still one First Marshal's Bodyguard. And again, I feel as though the defenders didn't learn. I feel as though Isengard time and time again pushed through. And time again they left it to the last minute, and this time they were finally punished for it. too reluctant to commit forward reinforcements quickly. And that might cost them here. In fact, I think it probably will. I don't think Cardland have got the resources left to kill off all of these, and First Marshal's bodyguard charging into the back of the pike unit of all things. This is the blob you want to be charging into, kill off some more of this infantry. But the addition of, I think, you know, it's these berserkers with the armour upgrade which is really going to push Isengard over the edge here. I think this is going to be the end for Cardland. That's really tragic. They had Isengard right where they wanted them. Routing Wardens of Tyr and Gorthad, yeah. You know when that's happening, the things are bleak. The Ballista crew also now routing off. The Guards of Orthanc proving to be real MVPs here in the late game. Able to withstand a melee fight with the Dunedain captains. I don't see where else this is going to go other than an Isengard win.
Behold how our cowardly foe runs. It's time to press the attack.
Well, that's the rest of Starling's army, but at this point it's Arcturos alone who is going to be able to claim the glory here, you would imagine. But yeah, I think this is going to be it. Just one unit of Dunedain captains with their backs to the wall is not going to be enough, I don't think. 35, yeah, I mean, with all of this Uruk-hai infantry. Like, 1-to-1 they probably defeat the Berserkers in this situation, but not with all of this. Alas. Oh, it's... Again, I mean, I'm sure that this video is going to get dislikes for the fact that Isengard essentially won by pushing through the lines, but the defenders did not learn their lesson. It happened time and time again, and they did not reinforce their lines quickly enough, and they paid the price for it in the end, which is a real shame, because this probably would have been the biggest percentage comeback I've shown, from 30% down, the defenders coming back to win it, but in the end, threw it all away. Isengard going to be able to pick up the W here, unless, I mean, it would be real scummy if the Cardland were to win this by running out the clock with individual units of 1. Because I get the point that, you know, yeah, there's a time limit, but really the time limit should only really apply to the fact that Isengard need to conquer this area here, which they are going to. You know, the land is lost. But we'll see. I mean, there's still a fair amount of time left, and there's not a lot of time left on the clock. Yeah, these Dunedain captains finally going to be brought down by the Uruk-hai, and this, I think, leaves these two lads over here. So we have the First Marshal's bodyguard, the Rohirrim general, and from the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul, the Cardland general. So, what do we do here? So they're going to split up 1 and 1. I mean, at this point, Isengard cannot catch this guy. So if they really did want to run down the clock, they could do it, and they would win, technically speaking. But I can't in good faith say that the defenders will win this if this is the case. It doesn't make any sense for them to win based on these two lads just running all over the field. You know, within the time limit, Isengard were able to conquer sort of this tomb back here, which, for all intents and purposes, means, regardless of what happens with regards to the time limit, the moral victory belongs to Isengard. And whatever anyone says about the rules of the scenario, there is no way that this constitutes a victory in any sense of the word. The only reason would be if the goal here was to assassinate the generals, in which case the defenders are incredibly lucky that the 2 soldiers they have left are general units, as the Uruk-hai chased them down. Yeah, Pasternak. It's ironic that Pasternak is the first defensive army to lose all of their men. I mean, Master Blast is certainly going to lose his general. I mean, he can run, but he might not actually. an eye on that. You can imagine that the Hearthguard is, well, he's very tired. Guards of Orthanc are merely tired. God, this would be infuriating if you were on the attacking team. I think I'd be legitimately upset if this happened to me. I was going to say initially that I feel bad for the defenders, but I no longer feel bad for the defenders, I think it's fair to say. There's not really much I can do to commentate on this. Oh, hello. Eclipse has decided to get some shots off, which, you know, is a little bit more honourable. I mean, based on the amount of time left, based on how little we see there, the defenders are going to win this. They're going to run out the clock, certainly. Look at this nonsense. Oh, hello. Well, the Cardinal General is going to charge it. I presume that Arcturos was a little bit displeased in the chat and demanded that the defenders turn and face him. This is going to be the end of the Cardinal General. Didn't manage to get a final kill either. So, what's this over here? Some routing ballista crewmen. This is going to be it then. We only have to focus on this one guy. The Rohan General. The Lone Ranger. As he's being chased by Uruk-hai. He's going to do it, you know. He is going to win. But there's nothing Arcturos can do about it, really. He's now in the open section of the field. They don't have any missile units left, which, I mean, I suppose, you know, if they just had one unit of archers or crossbows or something, but even then the Rohan General would just stay out of range of them. The only thing that really would have helped is if he had wargs, but... Come on, man. Is this how you want it to end? I suppose, technically speaking, it's been a very close fight. The fight itself was really fun, really close, really hotly contested. For it to end like this is interesting. He's going to charge in here to the Uruk-hai infantry and kill off a good amount of them as well. But this Uruk-hai infantry. Still got berserkers as well. He's clearly not going to charge into the berserkers because one swing from their mighty greatswords and could be game over for the Rohirrim General. Continuing to just run around. There's some Uruk-hai infantry which he might charge into. Nope. He thinks better of it. And at this point he can ride off into the sunset and be victorious, I suppose.
The day comes to an end.
Well, a draw. I mean, I don't really know how people are going to react to how that ended. Personally, I think we can just safely give the win to Isengard. They conquered the point within the time limit. Having two generals running around all over the field, stretching out the timer, is not, unless literally the rules of the scenario where you have to assassinate the generals and you win, in which case it's kind of understandable. But if not, then Isengard wins. But I'm sure that will be clarified in the comment section by probably Master Blaster. He will certainly clarify all the things that I am ignorant of. Meanwhile, let's go and have a look at the kills. This is Master Blaster's army, and the Tharbad Warhammer's getting a lot of kills there. Both units, but in particular this one, the one that he probably saved for the final stand. The Hearthguard also. Gwathlo Tracker's doing decently well. Meanwhile, Pasternak's army, obviously the Rangers doing extremely well in this situation. Dunedain captains mixed, I suppose. The Wardens of Tingorth had one of them getting 745 kills. Yeah, I mean, I feel as though the defenders could have won this if they simply reinforced their lines more quickly when they saw Isengard mass pushing. You have to remember, Isengard are not exactly, you know, of all the Orc factions, they are the weakest at doing that because they don't have any really dedicated units like the Cave Trolls or the two Great Shield units that can do that. So, in the end, I do feel as though the attackers deserve the win. But I'm sure that people will share their opinions in the comments, and I'd be interested to read them, because this was certainly an odd one in a few ways, but it was still very good. I enjoy the map quite a lot. I feel as though this is exactly the sort of map which would work very well for just a 4v4 or a free-for-all in particular, 2v2, v2, v2. And hopefully that's something that I can show in the future, because I feel as though this map really lends itself quite well to that, with the varying terrain, all of the different settlements, the choke points, the open fields, the hills, the cover. All of that sort of thing would lead to quite varied armies and teams, I think. But again, that's something which presumably we can talk about for the future. But for now, this was definitely a fun scenario to behold, and I'm definitely glad that Master Blaster sent it to me. Next, I have some form of Imladris versus Dwarf Siege. I also have a 3v3 from the roleplay, from the Discord. I don't know which of those would be next. Probably the roleplay, because it is a sort of a field battle 3v3, which sort of lends itself well. Again, I want to do like scenario, sort of set piece battle, and then sort of field battle, which is based more around varied tactics, and then go back to a set piece and sort of alternate like that if I can. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.